Our lectionary text this morning is from the Gospel of Luke, the 15th chapter, beginning at the very first verse. So, insert if you'd like to read along with me. Luke chapter 15, verse 1. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. Well, suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who don't need to. Or, suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp and sweep the house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner whose repentance. And this is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Howard, glad you're with us. We're talking about mission statements this morning. You might be able to lead some insight. Mission statements, they're very important, aren't they? Yeah, we teach them in our MBA classes. They're very important for businesses and for organizations. They articulate purpose and they guide focus and resources, and they also provide a means of assessing the organization. Walmart's mission statement is to save people money so they can live better. I guess we all live better. The more money we save. McDonald's mission statement: to be our customers' favorite place and way to eat. Favorite place and way to eat. Chick-fil-A, I kind of talked about them last week. Chick-fil-A's is to be America's best quick service restaurant. It's kind of saying the same thing, isn't it? But I love their purpose. It's got nothing to do with the sermon, but I just want to share it. Their Chick-fil-A's purpose is to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us. To have a positive influence on all who come in contact with our brand. That's phenomenal, isn't it? But anyway, so the mission statement. See if you can guess this one. This is the mission statement of a company you're familiar with. To refresh the world in mind, body, and spirit. To inspire moments of optimism and happiness through our brands and our actions. Anybody want to brave a guess? I'll read it again. To refresh the world in mind, body, and spirit. To inspire moments of optimism and happiness through our brands and action. Coca-Cola. That's kind of high aspirations for a fizzy, sugary drink, isn't it? I mean, think about that. Inspiring moments of optimism and happiness. Does anybody know the mission statement of First Christian Church? Anybody? It's in your bulletin, people. Yeah. It's right there in front of you. I was just waiting. To love God, to serve others, and lead others to Christ, right? It's our mission statement. You ever had to write one? I've had to write a couple in my MBA and also in my undergrad for religion. Professor wanted us to engage in this administrative function and assigned us the task of writing a mission statement for a church. And mine was, it's already been done. It's called Matthew 28:19. We call it the Great Commission. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And so I wrote this grand paper about, we should be allocating resources to restate the obvious, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, that's the mission statement given to us by our founder, our leader. And when you think about it, we call it the Great Commission, but when you think about it, all the mission statements of the churches are really just a rewording of that in some form or fashion. Right? Ours at First Christian Church is really kind of, to me, a combination of the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, right? Does anybody know the Great Commandment? When Jesus was asked what was the greatest commandment, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, right? Your neighbor as yourself. So, love of God and service to neighbor. And then, sharing the gospel. So it's like a combination of the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. And we probably had a committee spend like multiple meetings on trying to write this mission statement so that we would know what our purpose is. Do what? We did. Helen was there, obviously. So, restating the obvious if you want to look at it that way. And so the Great Commission, really, if you water it down, is simplistically go and make, right? Go and make. And so it's a twofold commandment or instruction. Go out into the world and you have to make disciples. You've got to bring them in and build them up. So go and make. Just keep that in mind. Well, today's text is, and it's the required text by the lectionary, and they recommend us reading these two parables together. But technically, the chapter is 3 parables, and really, when you go to study them, you need to look at all 3, because they are 3 stories of lostness. There is the parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and then, although it's unique to Luke, the one that is the most endearing to most of us, the parable of the prodigal son, or the loving father, or the forgiving brother, however you want to look at it. The prodigal son is what we know it as. 3 of the most famous and perhaps most endearing parables in our faith that culminate in that one story of the lost son. So we're going to kind of look at all 3, but I want to start in the middle because I strive for clarity. Just remember, one person's clarity is another person's confusion, and deal with it. So the lost coin. The parable of the lost coin is a good place to start because it is the shortest of the 3. And it's a story of a poor widow who obviously has limited resources, and she has lost a coin. Now, it's not a penny. It's a silver coin that would be the equivalent of one day's wages. So she's lost a day's income, but she's only got 10 days' income. So one of her 10 days is gone. So she's obviously on limited income. And so the story makes sense to us, doesn't it? She's lost 1/10 of her income. And we understand why she lights a lamp and why she sweeps the house and tears her place apart to find it. It's not that she doesn't have 9, but that one can make a difference. Maybe in whether she eats for the rest of the month. So we understand her diligent search, and we understand the fact that when she does find it, there is great rejoicing. To find this resource that she needed, just to exist. And then we go back to the first parable, the shepherd and the lost sheep. Now this one is a little different. Now we know the shepherd is probably not the owner of the flock, but probably hired to oversee the flock, paid to care for and protect the flock. And part of that care is going after the minority. He's entrusted to keep them all together, and he's entrusted to keep them all accounted for. So when he discovers one is missing, he leaves the 99 to go looking for that one. But we need to understand those 99 too are still at risk. They are in the wilderness. Now, they're not 99 laid safely in a fold somewhere. They're not in a secure pasture or a stable. They themselves are out in the wilderness. And so the shepherd goes out, but he goes out at great risk. Perhaps jeopardizing the entire flock or a portion of it for the one. So there is hope for gain, but there's also risk for loss. And so it's almost kind of a foolish decision maybe to risk all, to risk the safety of this quote-unquote secured flock, to risk his own life and his own safety for one. And while it doesn't make sense, it is the famous picture of God who throughout the Bible is illustrated as the shepherd, and who Jesus himself claimed to be when he came to God's children. And Jesus makes that connection that should be obvious for us when he says that while there's also great rejoicing in the physicality of it, there is great rejoicing in heaven. The one thing that ties them both together is that there is no giving up in either one of these stories. These stories of lostness are really a story about value. Both of these items have value. Now, I don't place too much value in money. And maybe if I did, I'd have more of it, but I don't, you know. And the sheep, too. It's technically a financial resource. Perhaps more so. Going after the sheep is really kind of a business decision. You know, there's risk, but there's potential value. I guess it's kind of like investing in a stock market, because there's realized and unrealized gain. You know, in that one sheep. You know, because if it does come home and mature, obviously be worth more money than it is now, or if it's possible that you can breed it. You know, so there's potential earnings involved. So it's kind of like a business decision. So there's values of both of these lost things, but as I said, you got to understand these in light of the apex of the chapter, of the crux of the story, which is the parable of the son. And the parable of the prodigal son is kind of where Jesus adds his punctuation mark to all of these stories. The prodigal son. Prodigal means wasteful, but we know his wastefulness results in a lostness. So he's kind of the misguided son who ends up being lost. But this time, the lost thing is not a financial thing. This time, what's lost is an individual. This time, what's lost is a soul. A child. A child who is loved but lost. And the sad story is it's intentional, right? You know, he made this decision. He made his bed. And when he does come to his senses in that pigsty and returns, many would feel he deserved to be lost. That's what the brother felt. But in the story, there's the father, who Jesus told us the whole time was looking. Standing on the porch, watching the road, you know, just hoping today would be the day that his son would come back. His condition is the worst, but his value is the most. 3 stories of the lost, reflected upon in the joy of the final. First of all, that's a wonderful analogy for sinners. They're lost. Right? They're not evil. They're not bad. They're not wicked. They're not unforgivable. They're just lost. The sheep and the coin. Now they were lost, but it was the prodigal who was sinned and gone astray and missed the mark. But really, he was just lost, and the Father was still looking. And that key phrase we need to keep remembering is rejoicing. Rejoicing over restoring the flock. Rejoicing over finding lost resources. Rejoicing over bringing your family back together. Rejoicing in heaven over one sinner that comes home to God. question stirring around the church for the last couple of weeks. How do we get more members? Well, there is no magic pill, but to me it goes back to our mission statement. Love God, serve others, and reach out with the gospel. Or just water it down to the Great Commission. Go and teach. Go and make. Go out and bring them in. Now, when they're here, it's our mission to help them grow in faith. And we put a lot of effort and time and resource in having Sunday school and Vesper services and worship services and special services so that people can grow in their understanding of God and find ways to serve God. The question is, how do you get them here? Drummond, who's a professor of ministerial leadership, an author, and serves as a minister at Harvard University, states that for years we've been trained in receiving people. And now we have to learn to recruit people. Receiving people. I mean, that's the way it was when most of our churches were first starting, when we were first growing, back in the post-World War II era up till about the 70s, you know. We were a Christian society, and everybody went to church for one reason or another, you know. But everybody went to church, and people just came. And our method of evangelism was leaving the door unlocked during the service so that they could come. People don't come now. It's rare that they just show up. And there's a lot of reasons, and if you ask them, they'll give you a multitude. But I think the real reason is they don't feel a need, and they don't feel a purpose. There is no absolute truth, so there is no need for salvation. There is no value in the church because it's just filled with a bunch of hypocrites, and we don't do any good in the community anyway. They are the lost. But they're like the prodigal, they just don't know it yet. And so we've got two choices. First of all, is we can just sit back and wait on them to come to their senses. And when they do, by golly, hopefully we'll still be here. If we look at the parables as the models in business terms, Jesus said only 1/3 of them come to their senses on their own. Right? The sheep didn't come back on its own, and the coin didn't roll back into the purse. So perhaps the method of just waiting on people to show up isn't really going to work anymore. And the church model that most of us are using doesn't fulfill the mission in today's society. That old church method of waiting on them to come doesn't work. But you know what? There's an older method that says go. Go into the world. The sheep was lost and the shepherd went. The coin was lost and the widow went. God came to us in the form of Christ, and Christ went. And he instructs his followers to do so. The Great Commission, twofold instructions. First of all is go. Don't wait. Don't expect them to come to you, but go to them. Then stay and make disciples. And the sad thing is we put all of our resources and efforts into that last part, and we're really good at that last part. Really good at it. Our Lord said, I have come to seek and save the lost. But seeking is a thing that we don't do very good at anymore. And then we wonder why our churches aren't growing. They're not growing because too often we're like the father standing on the porch looking to see if anybody's coming. See if anybody's kicking the dust up off the road because it's not been traveled that often here lately. But Jesus gives us the example of the shepherd and the widow to follow as well. And it makes us ponder, or it makes me ponder, our commitment to our mission. Because again, that's an assessment of how effective we are in fulfilling our reason for being here. When you look at allocation of resources and all this other stuff, you see that it's all tied into maintaining what we got. Because most of us think our mission is just to be here for us, the faithful. If It's here to serve us, the 99. And we'll continue to come, and we'll continue to support it as long as our needs are met. You know, as long as the programs are beneficial to my needs in my life, and the music is uplifting, and the preacher makes us laugh, and sometimes makes us think. And we'll come here kind of regularly. 3 stories with the same thing, to me, just seems to be an element of importance to Jesus. He has to tell 3 stories about the same thing. There's a story about a young seminary graduate who had his first church, and he came and he preached a good sermon that first Sunday, and he came the next week and he preached the same sermon. And the congregation was kind of curious, but they just went, oh, you know, he's been under a lot of pressure maybe. Comes the next week and he preaches the same sermon. Well, then the elders had to intervene, you know. We can't have this. They called him aside, look, you're preaching the same sermon 3 weeks in a row. He said, well, I can't give you another one until you figure this one out. If Jesus is telling us something over and over and over again, maybe we need to figure something out here, people. There's a message he obviously wants us to know. 3 stories, same thing, most important. And the text tells us the reason. Because the Pharisees and the scribes and all the good religious folk were grumbling because he welcomes sinners and eats with them. They're criticizing his popularity. Not so much that he's popular, but who he's popular with. He's popular with the prodigals. He receives them and eats with them and hangs out with them and engages them. As one person said, believers should be engaging the lost in meaningful relationships in their lives, but too often in the church, however, it's the opposite. This person admits, in our society, these relationships are hard. But we all have opportunities. We all engage the lost in our day-to-day life. At work, at social contacts, in our neighborhood, as we go out to eat. And it's not that hard. Jesus went out of his way to go to those people that the religious folk neglected and rejected and overlooked. It's that value thing. If what we use our resources on shows their worth in our minds, how much worth are we placing in the lost today? Because if everything we've got is focused inwardly, we're only doing half our job. If all you do is focus on the 99, we're neglecting the lost. We're neglecting the clear command of God and Jesus Christ. If all we're doing is catering to the 99, we're never going to grow as a church, and eventually those 99 will die. Jesus pursued the lost with such a vigor that it made good religious folk quake. But wherever he went, the lost were found. Are we following his example? Are we faithful to the instructions of God? Are we faithful to our own mission statement that we have developed as a church? Go. Because there are things of value out there that are lost. And when you find them, there's going to be great rejoicing. Let's turn to our hymn of invitation. Ask the Lord at the end of the service, you stand and join with us in singing 477. Pastor and I will do 1 and 3 and challenge you to take that spark that God has given you, take it out in the world and share it with